Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thanks for hanging out with us for the next hour or so. We've got a great discussion lined up, and I can see you all trickling in right now. We had, I think, close to 1,000 people on this one, so we're going to have a lively group. And what we're going to be discussing is one that we don't talk about too much, actually, and we should more on Sales Hacker, and this is the idea of selling to the enterprise. You know, those big, huge, complex deals, and specifically what we're going to hone in on today is how to avoid some of these lurking deal killers, some of these things that maybe happen behind the scenes that we're not privy to, that blow these deals up, and we don't know why it happened. And in my eyes, we've got the perfect panel to run through this. And before I do introduce my awesome panelists here, super quick housekeeping as people are trickling in. So number one, if you've ever been on a Sales Hacker webinar, you do know that these are recorded. So we record all of these. So I know we're all working from home, and there's a whole slew of new crazy challenges that come with that. So if you have to jump off, go feed your dog, your kids are screaming at you, whatever it is, it's okay. Jump off and we'll have this recording to you in about 24 hours time. Number two is we have an excellent roundtable that we're going to be running through. We've got some pillars of content we want to get through, but we do these for the Sales Hacker community. And it's always the most fun when the community is actually in the driver's seat. So you will see a Q&A section at the bottom. If you have questions pertaining to this topic, please ask them throughout. I'll kind of be acting as the voice of the community. So we'd love to help you wrestle with your specific challenges that you're having. And it's also a lot more fun for us when we know who we're hanging out with. So there's also a chat functionality that you can see there. If you want to jump on there really quick, give us your name, your title, maybe where you're zooming in from. It's always nice to see who we're talking to, at least in the chat. All right, we got that out of the way. I now want to introduce my guests. I am joined by Eric, Dini, and Karthik. Everyone, welcome.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
Good to be here.
Excited to have you all. And I'll quickly get you guys to go through your backgrounds, kind of the superhero origin story, what experience you'll be pulling from to answer some of these questions. And Dini, let's start with you. Dini's the CRO over at Lattice. Let's hear the background and the superhero origin story.
Hi, everybody. Super excited to be here. So as Scott said, I'm Dini Mehta. I'm currently the CRO at Lattice, which is a people management platform within the HR tech space. Been there for about a couple of years. We offer products like performance management, employee engagement, sell into the HR persona, and help people leaders with driving alignment and engagement for their workforces. I currently lead the revenue org, which includes sales, marketing, and partnerships. Prior to joining Lattice, I spent over a decade at different startups at different stages of hypergrowth, primarily selling into large brands and the marketing orgs at brands. So that's where majority of my experience lies. One of the common themes of working at startups, that's all I know, is your consistent and fast-growing startups at that. So there's always an element of like building for the future while you're executing in the present. And a lot of times that future is enterprise. Like we have a segment that's working. How do I start to crack into a new segment without sometimes not a pivot, sort of keeping what you're doing and adding on to it. So have a lot of scars from navigating that poorly. And so excited to share those learnings and learn from the other panelists here, and pumped to be here.
I love it. Well, we're lucky to have you. And I love that line of kind of building for the future while you're still taking care of, you know, the present is so important. Well, just to give the audience kind of an understanding of the scope, how many people are currently at Lattice?
Currently at Lattice, we're about 160 people. And across the revenue org, we're about 60 out of that.
Cool.
So,
And ballpark ARR, we're talking. It can be a range.
fast growth. We're
Fast growth.
tripling year over year over
Nice.
the last couple of years.
I love it.
Series C
I
company.
love it. Cool. All right. And next up, we have Karthik, who is the security lead at Robinhood. And before I get you to jump into it, Karthik, I think you hold the badge for the first kind of head of security that we've had on Sales Hacker. So I know myself and a lot of the community is very eager to pick your brain, because sometimes you can be a salesperson's worst enemy from our side. No offense.
None taken. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Karthik. I'm the head of security for Robinhood. I've been at Robinhood a little over 3 years. Before I got to Robinhood, though, I was actually on the other side of the sale. So I ran security for this company called Adipar. Adipar is a wealth management platform, and they sell to RIAs, funds, and more importantly, they started selling to banks when I was there. So Morgan Stanley is one of their biggest customers. So when we're talking about enterprise, there isn't a bigger enterprise than the banks that we had to go through 13 different rounds of due diligence for. So I led security there for 3.5 years, learned a lot of lessons when it came to how to position security to make sure that it doesn't become a blocker during a sale. I've been at Robinhood for a little over 3 years on the, on the side that makes all of you uncomfortable. And being on the other side taught me a lot about how to be empathetic and how to not be challenging in terms of making it easy for the stakeholders involved. People on my side don't like it when I block something. People on the other side don't like it when I block something. So I like to say that my job is to allow people to take intelligent risks versus be the guy that says no. So my background is in breaking into things and red teaming, pen testing, things like that. But the last 7 years of my life have been at fast-growing startups, trying to both protect the company and position the company in such a way that there is a feeling of trust when people are interacting with us.
Love it. That's awesome. Did you say my background is breaking into things? You can't say that sentence too much. I couldn't say that in an interview.
Yeah, I spent 3 years as a consultant. My actual job was breaking into things. So
that sounds like a fun job. And Robinhood, of course, we all have heard of Robinhood. Are you guys? I've heard, and you can confirm or deny this. I've heard there's been this explosion in kind of novice investing through isolation. Maybe casinos are closed. I don't know what it is. People are.
I don't want to comment on it. I will say that I don't like the comparisons to casinos and gambling. That's not what Robinhood is. We are an investment platform. We want to make the markets more accessible to individuals and allow people to participate in it. I am not going to say too much beyond that. We are seeing more users, and that's what our mission is, to democratize the markets, for everyone. It's a fun game.
Yeah, totally. I think it's awesome that more people are kind of getting into the markets through this. Alrighty, last but not least, we have Eric Martin, who is the sales manager over at Vanta. Eric, welcome, man. And if you don't mind giving a quick synopsis, quick breakdown of how you got to lead such a fast growth company in sales.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Scott. So Eric Martin here, lead sales at Vanta. We're a cybersecurity and compliance company. In simple terms, we help companies to get and renew compliance reports like a SOC 2 in a very swift, efficient manner. Let's see, by way of kind of how did I get here? My background is actually in engineering. 2 engineering degrees, 2 failed companies, learned a lot. And now, I guess 6-7 years later, or I guess the past 6-7 years, have been in the world of sales. And yeah, really excited to be here. And once again, excited to share what we can.
Love it. It's interesting. I find so many top sales professionals that I know have engineering backgrounds. Seems like more and more that's a common thread. I think the modern seller and what makes someone successful in modern sales leadership actually translates over to a lot of the engineering qualities.
For me, getting into engineering from my parents' perspective was good life insurance. And, I think 18 to 22, very few people know what they want to do. And so, believe it or not, I found ways to leverage it still, even in my current role, but
yeah.
Here we are.
I love it. All right, let's dive right in. So first off, hello to everyone. Tons of people joining us. Sanjay, Kyle, Julia, Kevin, Josh, John, Colin from all over the world. Thank you all for hanging out with us. But let's dive in. And this question, I'll kind of get everyone's perspective on it, and I think it's a good jumping off point. And Dini, I'm going to start with you. First off, should every company try to sell to the enterprise? And why or why not?
My answer would be, if you can avoid it, avoid it. So no, I don't think every company should try to sell to the enterprise. I think a lot of times, especially in startups, you tend to underestimate the amount of work required to really move into enterprise, especially if you have an existing business or a cohort of customers that you're supporting. Because the reality is you have limited bandwidth, you have limited resources. That's the life at a startup. And if you're going to open up a new segment, you want to make sure that you're doing it intentionally and really doing your research and prep before taking on that complexity. So one of my biggest learning lessons is trying to do enterprise as just a go-to-market team without having the alignment across the whole company. Because, if you want to move into enterprise sales, if it's right for your market, for your product, you have to do it intentionally and it has to be sort of across the company. So many examples of like your marketing org makeup changes, your sales talent needs are very different. The type of deals you're now navigating require a very different process. So my answer would be, don't have to, but if you are going to do it, put in the research and the discovery and the alignment before you take that step, and save yourself some years of heartache and pain.
Yeah, that's huge. I've certainly seen a lot of smaller companies try and bite off more than they can chew and make that bet to go all in on enterprise too early. Maybe the product's not ready. And also just by way of how long the deal cycles are, right? Like if you can't wait 9 months to a year and a half for your cash flow, these are all things you have to take into account. Eric, I'll pass the baton over to you now. What do you think on this one?
Well, yeah, just to add to what Dini said there, another consideration that it's easy for sales orgs to overlook is just the anticipated or the actual amount of support that these enterprise companies are going to require or may require that your kind of like standard ICP customers may not. And so beyond the kind of architectural considerations of like, hey, is the app going to freeze or are loading times going to be minutes versus seconds for your traditional fit customers? One thing that I find like sales folks and myself included are guilty of kind of neglecting is just how you're going to support them after you do get them over the line. So
yeah, that's a great point to bring up, this idea of, hey, even if you can get them over the line, now what? You have to now support this massive organization that maybe has thousands of users that you've never had. Is your CS team ready for that? Is your support team ready for that?
Yeah, we made pretty conscious decisions around like kind of which size of companies to go after with that in mind. Just saying, hey, not only are these our low-hanging fruit, not only can we guarantee these folks have a good experience, but also like from once again, like to Dini's point, a human resource standpoint, these are the types of companies that like, it just makes sense for us as a business to be going after today.
Yeah. And Kevin is agreeing. He says that he had this exact issue at his last employee. Product wasn't ready for market, kind of took it to the Fortune 1000 and had zero sales across a 12-person sales team over 12 months. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Karthik, anything else to add there? Do you believe that every company should be going after the enterprise?
I think my instinct is that it is really hard for most companies to go after the enterprise because of, you guys said it earlier, security folks can kill the deal sometimes. And if you're not ready for that level of security scrutiny, it's probably not the best idea to go after the enterprises. When an enterprise is looking at it, they're looking at, you're dealing with many teams. You're dealing with the security team, you're dealing with the risk team, you're dealing with the compliance team, and all of these people have really difficult questions around how you're managing risk as a company. And a lot of small startups don't really have a security guy to speak of. The CTO is, or the VP of engineering is doubling up as a security person. And it's really hard to convince enterprises that, yeah, I know what I'm doing with security when you don't really have somebody repping you there. So my instinct here is, you need, before you're ready for that, you need to have enough of a product that you actually need a security person to protect it, and that can actually represent you in a lot of these calls, so that, and have, and be ready to take on a SOC 2. SOC 2s, SOC 1s, all of these are expensive assessments. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of money, they take a lot of process. And so you need to be ready for that level of process at a company before you go after the enterprise deals. My experience is it takes a while in terms of the product being mature before you can get there.
Hmm. Yeah, all great points. Question for you: do security guys talk to each other? Let's say you went, and would you socialize it with your other, security friends of like, hey, we did this and they came up really short. So are you shooting yourself on the foot in more ways than you think?
Security guys definitely talk to each other. Security people in general, there are CISO forums, there are these, there used to be these dinners that we used to go to, but now we have these Zoom calls and we talk about vendor security all the time. It's a pretty big topic, especially now in the COVID-19 world, when there are more vendor reviews happening than before, because there's more need for vendors for a lot of things. And we definitely talk about companies. We talk about process more than we talk about companies. But if there was a company that really stood out to us, we will discuss it as, yeah, this happened and they're doing better, but this is something to look out for. Or if one of the things that happens sometimes is sales folks might say, oh yeah, Karthik from Robinhood, we spoke to him and he seems pretty impressed. If you say things like that, people will reach out and say, hey, what did you actually think about this? And I'm going to be, for the most part, I'm going to be pretty honest about what I think versus, present a rosy colored lens. So it's important that the security community is really small. It's a very small market. It's a very small set of people, and it's pretty closely knit. So yeah, people do talk about how a vendor review went or how a vendor presented themselves.
Yeah, very, very good to know. So there's that. If you go too early to the enterprise, you might be spoiling it. It's not just the fact that you can like, oh, okay, let's stop and we'll try again in 9 months. You might be kind of spoiling the whole waters there. That's good to know. All right, so it sounds like maybe avoid it if you can, tread lightly, make sure the product is ready. Let's dive a little bit more into the challenge before we start, presenting some things. Is why are companies right now struggling to sell to the enterprise? And Eric, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So I guess we have a front row seat of this because many of the companies who we help are early to mid stage businesses who are trying to go close their first enterprise customers. Are like, our product, yes, helps companies to go get these reports and kind of mature their security posture, much more faster than kind of traditional routes. But our second full-time job is helping these folks just navigate these risk assessments and these, potential like phone calls they might have with the security teams from these orgs. I joke that my second full-time job is helping people to avoid getting things like a SOC 2. But really the way we think about it is, companies come to us all the time asking just like, hey, is it something I should do? When should I do this, etc. And the short answer there is, we like to tell people, hey, do whatever your partners, prospects, or customers are asking for. But there is some truth, and Karthik can chime in here on if you are working in a certain industry or sub-industry, then these compliance certifications or reports are just going to be table stakes. And so I remember when I joined Vanta, I just assumed, because I had come from a company where I lost a deal because we didn't have a SOC 2 Type 2. So I assumed that everyone was going to be in this position. But the reality is that for better or worse, maybe because SOC 2 is now just much more attainable for these smaller businesses, companies are coming to us well before they're even being asked for these things. So it's fairly interesting. But I'm curious to hear what the others say on this.
Karthik, you want to jump in there and add anything on top of that?
Yeah, I think SOC 2 Type 2 is a great example because a lot of, especially for well-funded startups that are trying to enter the enterprise space, the advice they hear from VCs, or even from a lot of companies now have security advisors, either through their venture capital partners or directly. The first thing they'll tell them is, get a SOC 2 Type 2. The way to get a seat on the table is to get a SOC 2 Type 2. It doesn't mean you'll get the deal, but it means you'll get a seat at the table. And then you can start the sales process. So, and a SOC 2 isn't, especially with companies like Vanta helping you, a SOC 2 isn't that hard to get for a 30-40% company. It's hard to get for a 5-6% company, for sure. But it's not that hard to get for a company that is ready to enter the enterprise space and that has an engineering team and a product team that is ready to add some process into the mix and be more mature in terms of how they're handling things. So I think in this day and age, having a SOC 2 Type 2, it's table stakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Dini, I'll go, we have a specific question here that's kind of in the same vein. So I'm going to shoot you with this one. This is Michael Ewing. Michael, thanks for the great question. I'm seeing a ton of really good questions. Thanks for everyone's very kind of informed and definitely leaning in. This is, Dini, how long did it take you to win your first enterprise deal? And what was the biggest challenge in the process? We're a small business facing the exact issues you just described, i.e. we have a bunch of customers, but we're not wholly focused on the enterprise initiative as a company like we should be.
Yeah. I have like multiple answers to that because I've done it.
We'll take them all.
I've done it a few times. The first time we never got there. And the best version was we eventually just folded enterprise the first time we tried it. We made a bunch of mistakes. And the best version was when it took us from the first sort of, let's start doing some discovery, let's start talking to these customers to learn about the space, to like, when are we going to close our first deal, get the company aligned, get buy-in that we're going to do this, start building product, start thinking about what does that mean for support, what does that mean for functionality, what are the things we can build in our phase one. So I think a lot of times companies go to enterprise too fast, and it's like a sequencing thing. Like you phase it out, especially if you have an existing business you're trying to support while doing this. So long-winded way, 12 months is the earliest that we've been able to do it. And that's with a few friendly customers saying, hey, help us build this. And I think that's key too, like doing it in a smart way and not fooling yourself thinking that the few friendly customers that are helping you build that is now you have an enterprise business. Like you've still got to go convert friendly customers that came from referrals or investor relations to, okay, can I do this? Can we do this with a team of sellers out there? Do we have enough product functionality to earn the right for at least a discovery call? I think that's the first step. And so thinking about it in like small chunks and just accepting that it's a multi-year full company effort is the one way to sort of at least manage your own psyche through it.
Yeah. Lots of nuggets on there. One of them I want to double click on, you kind of breeze through investor relations. I think that's super important. How do you think about engaging, your investors? Because that, pull on my experience with outreach, that has been a great channel for us of them introducing us to some of these really big behemoth companies that we would have to knock on the door for 9 months to even get a meeting. How have you kind of been doing that at Lattice, and how have you seen success with that in the past?
Yeah, no, I think early on in my career, I undervalued the ability to get referrals from customers and your investors. And so now, knowing that instead of taking the hard way, this is a slight shortcut to at least get initial feedback. And so we have a great board and tons of investors that help us make introductions. Again, like picking the right companies for introductions. Like I think Eric said this, going up market too fast. Like if your average customer size is 500 employees and under, now all of a sudden you're going to go talk to Bank of America, like you may be setting yourself up to fail. So really being focused of, okay, from 500, we're going to go to 1500. So let's take a step up. Like I love creeping up market versus sort of running up market and pivoting, because I think that's where a lot of the op cost challenges start coming up. Because I think, Scott, you said this, getting them to sign is just the first step. And then like they're going to need all these product resources and support. How do you make sure you do that properly? But yeah, we at every board meeting will have asks of, here's 5 customers we're really trying to get into it. Here's the folks to do some research, due diligence, and then have a targeted ask. That's worked really well for us.
Okay. Eric, anything to add there? How do you guys engage your investors at Vanta?
Yeah, I was going to say, we do the same thing. When we define them as the lead source, we're going to start adopting the moniker. We call those privileged intros. But effectively, yeah, today we use them in 2 ways. VCs happen to be a quite large just lead channel for us generally, for them to communicate to their portcos and or companies they want to invest in. When they know those companies are trying to sell to the enterprise and need to address compliance, it makes them look good to send them to us. On the flip side, to Jeannie's point, we also will use them very strategically if and when we want to do research on what a gap might be for us to go sell to a 20,000, 30,000 person company versus who we generally work with. So we take a lot of pride in the relationships that we have with these folks, and almost think of them as partners as much as they are investors. And we lean into them pretty hard.
Yeah, I love it. And Karthik, I've got a question for you coming up from the community, because it's better than the question I was just about to ask. So I'm going to do this one. This is from Nikolai. And what I'm getting from this question is there's a scenario where salespeople, when they're selling to an enterprise, will do like a land and expand model. And they'll try and like skirt the big security and going through all the hoops and be like, nah, I got my champion. They're bought in. We'll just roll this out. It's only 6 people. We're good. And then, maybe you get completely shut down and blown up. And so he says, question on shadow IT. When you find out someone has bought a software that hasn't been cleared by security, how do you approach this? And how frequently would you shut down that software? It's a good question.
It's a great question. I'll start with my overall philosophy here, which is I am there to be a guardrail for the company, not to be a guard, which means that if somebody does this, the first thing I'm going to do is sit down and have a conversation with them about why they did not talk to me about it first, because I try to make their life easier, not harder. But do I shut this down? Honestly, the answer to that is it depends. It depends on what the software is. It depends on what they brought on board. If they brought on board something that gets access to all of our G Suite data, yeah, I'm going to shut it down until I finish the full due diligence. If they got something that helps them manage their calendar better, okay, that's fine. We'll still do the due diligence. We'll still run through the hoops, and you'll still have to do all of the work. And if you can't, here's the rub of the deal. If you do that, if you've closed the deal and then I come in later, I'm going to impose all kinds of audit rights on you. And I know you've already closed the deal. It's going to be harder for me to do it, but it's going to be a question of, if it becomes a question of, am I protecting the company I work for, or am I doing a favor for this person? I'm always going to protect the company I work for. Which means that if I see something risky and I'm not happy with the security posture, I'm either going to renegotiate the contract, or when it comes up for renewal, you're going to be staring at 3 pages worth of audit rights. And that's not a great position for anyone to be in. It's better for you to work with the security team. In fact, ask the person to go to their security team with this yourself if you haven't gotten a security review and you're selling to someone, if they tell you we don't have a security team, great. It's okay. But if it's a big enough company, they probably have a security team. If they haven't spoken to the security team, ask them to go speak. It's not going to make your life harder 99% of the time. It's going to make your life easier, at least in the long term.
Yeah. Getting ahead of it is always the way to go. Just like with, back in the day, if you're trying to hide something from mom and dad and they find out, then you're going to pay the price. You might as well just get it up front. Eric, do you have something to add there?
I was just going to say, not to steal maybe a future question, but I thought in our kind of prep call, it was really interesting to hear what Karthik was saying about what was the first thing he went to go look for or look at a vendor, like when a vendor was brought on or being considered. Karthik, you want to dive into you honing on their like security page and kind of just the importance of that and kind of what you look for there?
Yeah, no, for sure. So let's say let's go along the same theme, right? Let's say I discover a vendor is being used for something that I didn't expect it to be used for. The first thing I do is go look and see if this company has a security page. If a company has a strong security page, and when I say a strong security page, I don't mean a legal policy that tells me that using this software is inherent with risks, blah, blah, blah. I mean an actual security page that tells me how to engage with your security team, how to report security risks, whether you have a bug bounty, what your practices are. There are some really good ones out there that you can follow. It's gotten easier and easier. There's a lot of bug bounty companies that will let you host a security page for free. They'll help you draft it. They'll help you do a lot of things that are right off the get-go. But when you're engaging with security teams, it's best to have that in place beforehand so that they have a positive impression of you and they're coming into the call. If there's a call in the future, they're coming into the call unbiased. Or if anything, they're coming to a call with a positive bias. Because if I go to a page, I don't see a security page, or I see a security page with legal jargon, I'm going to develop a bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And that's just going to make it harder when the actual due diligence takes place. So my recommendation is, even if you don't have a security team, work with a security-minded engineer, work with HackerOne, Bugcrowd. There's a bunch of different vendors out there for this now. Or just talk to your investor. They can introduce you to the right security person to help you craft this.
I remember real quick, Karthik, you said one example of a security site that you liked was Loom. So
yeah, Loom's privacy page is it's pretty incredible. I recommend. Like I was impressed when I was reading through it. I don't remember why I was reading through it, but they go into detail of how they use each of the vendors they use, how they use your data, what they do with your data. And that treatment of data is what is impressive to me. When I'm doing my due diligence, the thing I look for is, when you're taking my data, whose data do you think it is? And a lot of you are probably thinking, of course it's your data, but that's not always true. That's not always the treatment that I see. So if I see language in there, or if I see treatment in there that says your data is yours and we'll hold it sacred, and just a lot of really disciplined thought around it, I'm going to be impressed. I'm not, even if you don't have the perfect software type 2, even if you don't have the perfect vendor security assessment, if you're going to work with you to make sure that our stakeholders can use this because they clearly think they need this software. The security team is there to help them achieve their goals, not to block them. At least that's my philosophy, is that I'm there to help the company achieve its goals, not be there as, no, you can't do this. And in order to do that, you guys need to work with us in order to make sure we can make this smooth for everyone.
Yeah, I love it. And you mentioned something on the pre-webinar call we had as well, that it's, and you alluded to it a little bit there, but you prefer to see it in human terms, right? Don't just get your lawyer to write it all out, because then it's putting the work on you. You have to decipher all this legal jargon. Tell me in human terms, how you handle security, how you look at ownership of data. That's more helpful, right? And when presenting
Absolutely.
that as a seller to a head of security, use those human terms. Don't try and be fancy, right? And get in water that you don't know.
Absolutely.
Where you're swimming.
for me, the best way to frame this is imagine you're putting all of your, let's take money. You imagine you're putting all of your money in a particular product. What would you want to read from that product that makes you feel better about doing this? Now, imagine, replace money with data. Imagine you're the security guy on the other side, or the security person on the other side. What would you want them to see about your company? What would make them feel better right off the bat? Do that. Anything else is just going to be red tape.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so there's a few things here, pillars then, I guess, that we're kind of teasing out that you need to be enterprise ready, and that's product readiness, which we touched on. We're talking about security and risk and how you have to think about that differently. There's also a huge piece that Dini, I want to get your thoughts on, and that is having a standardized sales process. This is huge. So I'll kind of ask a two-part question, and Dini and Eric would love to hear your thoughts. A, how important is it to have a standardized sales process when you approach the enterprise? And then B, in your eyes, what are the pillars of an enterprise-ready sales process, and maybe even some specific tactics there?
Totally. There's, a ton of research out there that talks about having a standardized process and the correlation with high performance in sales orgs. So I'm a big believer. Process gets a bad rep, but I think even early on, when you're just a couple folks trying to do discovery in a new market, starting to define and move, like there's 5 stages that every org or team goes through. You start with chaos. There's like ad hoc effort. You're not tracking much. It's, there's not a lot of it's complete chaos. Stage 2, you start to define it a bit. You have a sense for here's my ICP, here's the folks that are involved in the decision, but not a lot of repeatability. Then you move into managed. And then eventually you want to get to the managed is sort of where it's okay in the startup chaos while you're still building to sort of live in. But I think if you continue to operate within the first stage, you could really risk AE burnout, not making a lot of progress, thinking that it's not working when you just haven't given it a fair shake. Or what you want to get to is sort of predictable, world-class, repeatable process. So that's the 5th stage. So getting from the chaos to managed and eventually reportable and predictable is sort of the goal. And there's a bunch of sort of in my mind, the 3 main pillars to get to managed is defining the market and really understanding the org that you're calling into and the pain point that you're trying to solve for. A lot of times what I see is startups take what they know about their current segment and assume it's the same upmarket when it's completely different a lot of times. And I think having that awareness of it's different and I have to go into this from a curiosity mindset and from a learning mindset versus I know what we're doing because we're so successful here. And if I just take this playbook and reapply it here, it's going to work. I've done it. I failed at it. Don't do it. So define it. I think having a qualification process is key in the early days because you're going to have limited resources to it. And it's more important to say no to things than sort of chase every opportunity. And then finally, the deal evaluation process. I can go for hours talking about all the stages and what you should be doing across the board. So yeah, that's sort of I think process is critical. And as you mature as an org and a business, you want to continue to mature your process with that. Because you also risk over processifying if you sort of try to do a lot in the beginning and not give the sellers creativity. So a lot of the pieces have to come together. But yeah, I'm interested to hear Eric's thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I was curious to ask you real quick, do you guys have at Lattice playbooks for the different segments?
We do. So we initially started with just standardized sales process across all segments. And then as you start to scale, it's important to specialize within each segment. So how we run sales and then SMBs inbound. And then eventually you want to do it by channel too, to start to really specialize. So yeah, we now have by segment sales process.
And maybe one follow on, who internally owns the kind of keeping those playbooks up to date as the business grows and yourself?
that's there's multiple owners, which may be partially a problem. But typically, I mean, what I've seen is it's owned between management and enablement. So at Lattice, we have parts of the playbook owned by managers. Enablement is sort of responsible to update it and make sure that they're training the teams on it. And then sales ops is responsible to make sure that we're implementing that within our infrastructure. So that way we're not just doing training on a specific process that we've picked. We're actually operating against that and executing against that over time.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah.
We predominantly have like a single segment today, and so there's one playbook, but I anticipate there being multiple. So just curious on that. I guess that just to piggyback on top of what Dini shared, another reason that it's important to have standardized sales processes, especially in these times, is because it enables more efficient scaling of your teams, right? And so we've been fortunate to land more on the boom than the bust side throughout the last, I guess, 4 or 5 months. And hiring reps virtually and training them remotely hasn't come without its challenges. And so being able to bring these folks on and kind of like present to them, you know, kind of how we historically have proven that we're able to get these deals done, tremendously helpful in terms of helping us to ramp folks without them having the opportunity, because we're historically in office culture, and hopefully one day again soon. And so without that kind of like in-between noise where you get to learn through osmosis through your peers, you know, having a standardized process or something that is even remotely standardized also just has really helped us in allowing us to not only continue to kind of thrive here, but also confidently add more people to the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great thing to point out, especially, you know, in the situation we're in, which you'll probably be onboarding remotely for at least the foreseeable future. Okay, so standardized sales process is key, multitude of different reasons. Let's spend a little bit of time. I know we have a lot of ICs on this webinar with us. What are some of the tactics that make up the overall kind of strategy? Let's get hyper tactical with a few things that you've seen working recently when you're talking to these big companies and trying to pull them across the line. And Dini, I'll start with you.
The few things that I feel like are the core tactics to start selling into an enterprise that we've seen success with is multi-thread early. I think everyone talks about multi-threading, but it needs to start at the prospecting phase. Like even our BDR teams, they're working with the AEs to map out an org and not just reach out to who we think is our champion or our economic buyer, but really having customized messaging. I hate automation. That's just one of my I grew up in the old school sales world where there wasn't as much automation. I think there's a good way to empower automation. So I think doing personalization is key from a multi-threading standpoint. So we've seen that work really effectively. I think discovery, like doing deep discovery, and nobody likes to hear this, but it is so core to really unlocking and understanding an organization's pain. And the more sort of curiosity lens you can take into that discovery, instead of I'm just going to ask the questions because I'm supposed to, is key. One of my favorite tactics is mini discoveries throughout the deal cycles. Because I think a lot of times people think of discovery as this thing you do in the beginning and then you're done. But those quick 10-minute check-in calls between your demos, between your exact presentations, between your trials, POCs, whatever the customer buying journey looks like, is so key to build relationships, but also to understand what's changed in the last 2 weeks. You uncover so much knowledge, and going into those calls again with a lens of curiosity instead of here's the things I need from you, focusing on the customer and really understanding how's security going. Here's sort of the areas that we need to work on. What's changed? Who's excited about it? Who isn't excited about it? One of the things that I just wish more people schedule those quick 5-minute, 10-minute check-in calls. And then the final piece is mutual action plans. Is I think once you have someone on the other side, you've earned the right to get a discovery. You've earned the right to get to a demo. They see value in your solution for the pain that they're seeing on their side. It's key to develop a mutual action plan that's co-managed with your buyer. That way you're saying, okay, we both agree that this is the common place, there's value here. What are some dates? What are some steps we need to get done? How do we and that's now you're becoming their ally in getting this thing done. Those are like three main areas, like discovery plus mini discoveries, multi-threading early and often, and across different roles as well, like exec to exec, head of security to head of security, and then finally mutual action plans. I feel like those are three really core pillars in terms of tactics.
Yeah, those are huge. Those are big ones. And Karthik, I'm curious to hear, how often does a mutual action plan come across your desk? Do you ever get someone coming and be like, hey, on January 17th, we're going to make sure we have security's approval? Does that happen?
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Nice.
We are actually in flight with an enterprise deal right now. I'm on the buyer side of it, and there is this massive project plan, and part of it is head of security approves. And the one thing I told the people involved was that that's kind of an ambitious take. This is a pretty large deal. You're asking both the company and me to make a serious investment here, and saying this is like a 30-day timeline. I'm going to approve this in 30 days. It's probably not going to happen. So let's be realistic about it, and let's actually make sure that we get comfortable with it. And this goes to something Dini was saying, which is the connections with the heads of security. This is a real story. So there is a vendor that I've worked with in my last job that I really liked. Wasn't a security vendor, but just some other vendor that I really liked. I really liked talking to their head of security, the entire process. It was awesome. When I came to this company, somebody said, hey, I want to use this vendor. What's the security process? I said, it's approved. You're good to go. Because we still followed the process. We still made sure they gave us the documentation and questionnaire and everything. But I didn't have to go through this massive due diligence because I'd already seen this vendor. I already had confidence that their security leader had their people and their minds in the right place. And so I can't overstate the importance of having somebody that can speak to your security practices directly on your side. So when you hear your security person saying, hey, this isn't great, or we need more process here, or we need to do this differently, listen to them. They're trying to help you close that deal versus trying to be an annoyance. Or you probably see this most when they roll out something like single sign-on or add two-factor authentication. You're like, why are you making this harder? They're helping you close that $1 million deal in the future. Because when I ask them, hey, how do you handle user access? And they tell me two-factor authentication, I'm going to be really happy with it. So all of this, everything most security people do, we're doing it with the long view in mind of protecting the firm. And if your firm is well protected, your sales process is going to be that much easier.
Mm-hmm. I like it. It's something I'm hearing there is, when you're making these mutual action plans, don't make them in a vacuum with your champion, right? Make sure that if you have a line item that says security, make sure that each stakeholder that owns that part of the plan has signed off on this. And someone had a comment, validate realistic timing on each one. I love it. Okay, so we talked a little bit, about security, standardized sales process. The one we've kind of jumped over, and there's a perfect question that was asked here by where was it? Darcy, that kind of gets into this product readiness. And I think all AEs on the call right now can feel this frustration. And the question is, as an AE, I don't make strategic team level decisions on the direction for the product, though I can help influence those decisions. As a salesperson, how can we best work with leadership and product to hone in on the best market or get the product teams ready for enterprise sales? So Eric, I'm going to go to you on this one. And if you can answer that question, also break down, what product changes do need to happen, how you can be a change agent, and maybe talk a little bit about this SOC 2 thing that keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's a good question. We've been thinking a lot recently about, we've got a lot of demand for content around enabling uh, the revenue side of the house to drive improved security and compliance on the EPD side of the house. Let's see. I think first and foremost, I can just speak to like the importance of having really strong feedback channels internally. So we rely on Airtable, for example, where whether you're a CSM or an IC, if you're having a conversation with a prospect or a customer, we make it really easy for the rep to not only relay that feedback to the right ears, but in a very quantifiable way so that like our product team can like in real time keep tabs on kind of what we're hearing and then assign their own kind of weighted value or score to that. As it pertains to, an IC kind of championing improved security or compliance, look, sales is the most quantifiable part of your business, right? All it usually takes is you're able to come to the table, presumably to your manager and or however higher up you need to go the chain, and tell them, look, I have this big fish on the hook and we're not going to reel them in unless we have a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001, whatever it may be. This kind of ties all the way back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, and this is one of our kind of key qualifying questions at Vanta, is like, hey, you're trying to close this big deal. Is this customer, do they match your ICP, or are these guys a bit of an anomaly? Because there's something to be said there about like putting in the calories to go get this compliance certification versus like getting your brightest engineer on the phone with Karthik and having them articulate kind of what it is you do today from a security, posture standpoint. So once again, I would just encourage folks out there who are like, if they are facing friction in getting deals done for reasons of security or compliance, hey, do no more than you can say, this is how big the deal is. This is why we need this thing. How much we value this revenue. If we do value it and we're going to be spending calories on more companies that look like these guys, that's your first kind of brick for like building a business case for, getting this done. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear what Deanie says on this and actually what Karthik says on this as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, Eric. For an IC, that is the perfect path, which is if you have a prospect on the hook, people are going to pay attention because there's internal selling involved. From a leadership standpoint, like if you're in sales leadership, revenue leadership, what you can do is similar, have a plan around, you understand the market, you understand sort of the nuances of what it's going to take to win in this market and what are the things that we need to build from a product standpoint, what are the areas we're going to have to invest from a marketing perspective, what are the things that we're going to invest as a sales org, and come to the table with that plan saying, here's the end goal, and as a result, here's how much incremental revenue we could book as a business. That is the magic of sales, where you can use numbers, but having a plan should be the bar. I think where I think in a lot of EPD leadership gets frustrated is when you just come saying, I have this one customer, this feature, build it, and everyone will come. When the reality is you need to have a more thoughtful, unified sort of plan with your revenue leadership. So I think, and again, it takes time. So making sure that you're sort of baking in the right expectations with customer too, and not overselling.
And I think that can be a team effort, right? Because like we have a pretty big prospect right now who literally, as we're having this webinar, they're meeting internally with their executive team, and it's actually the security and compliance folks at the table on the same side of the table as the revenue team saying, hey, look, over the last 12 months, because we haven't had a SOC 2, here's how much revenue we've left on the table. And so it doesn't need to be just revenue going for this. Like it can and probably should be a joint effort there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that more. In my last job, I remember the sales team came to me and said, hey, if we do these 4 things, we're going to be able to close these deals. And when I dug in, what they were really trying to say is, we have to fill out these annoying questionnaires. If you fill out this standardized questionnaire for us, we can just ship the standardized questionnaire. I was like, okay, let's actually explore that. Go back to all of the deals you've recently closed with your enterprise customers and ask all of them if they would accept this standardized questionnaire from us, or if we would need to fill out the standardized questionnaire anyway, or this questionnaire they're sending us anyway. And the reality was all of them said, no, we would need you to fill out our questionnaire anyway. So there is value in having your answers ready. But if you're thinking about investing in something like SIG or SIG-Lite or things like that, think really hard about the market you're going after, because that market might not be ready to accept that. They might have their own questionnaires, they might have their own format. The one thing I will recommend in having all of your answers lined up is the Vendor Security Alliance questionnaire. It's 108 questions, it's not that hard, and most security teams will have a conversation with you about it. It's not a checkbox, it's not yes or no questions, it's literally a conversation. And having thoughtful answers for that is important. And when I say thoughtful, I don't mean position yourself as super secure or got everything together. I mean be honest and talk about what risks you're thinking of and what risks you're not thinking of. That's the thing I'm looking for when I'm looking at these vendors is, what are the risks that you are aware of that I can trust you to handle? And what are the risks that you're going to be transparent to me that you're not ready to handle yet, that I need to handle? So yeah, that's my tip there. On like when I was on the other side, when I had to build things in order to help deals, the clarity I needed is, what are they looking for? What conversations do they need to have? Which is why I asked to be in the rooms where these conversations were happening about security and compliance, so that I could understand firsthand versus get it the other way around.
Love it. Lots of valuable insight there. Okay, we have 1 minute. I'm going to rapid fire, just start hitting you guys with some community questions. We'll see how many we can get through in a minute. Eric, first one for you. Are RFPs a must avoid or a must do if you want big enterprise deals? Do you lean into RFPs, or do you try and stay away from them?
I'm going to punt that one to Dini.
In between. I don't know if it's must do or must avoid, but we do put some qualification of you have to have a discovery call. It has to be within the segment that we've approved, and then we'll do the RFP. Blind RFPs we walk from.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's great advice. Last one, I'll sneak in. Dini, we'll get everyone quickly, say top or bottom. Does the panel prefer starting at the top of the enterprise company to prospect into, or bottom to build brand awareness? Dini, what would you suggest? Top-down approach, bottoms-up?
Depends on the market. I've seen both work well. For Lattice, we've seen top-down work really well. But in prior companies, we've seen the bottoms-up model work too. So I think a lot of it depends on your product and the market that you're building in.
Yeah, fair. Eric?
We've also seen both work. We'll just use Dini's verbiage earlier of multi-threading. So I guess the answer would be both.
Both. All right, that takes us to the top there. We got a ton of great questions. So I think what we'll do is we'll start a Sales Hacker channel on this topic, and we'll put some of these questions in that so we can keep this kind of conversation flowing. If this is stuff that you are currently going through, a lot of this was resonating, do check out the team over at Vanta. They can help you with a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. And best way to connect with you guys, are you guys all on LinkedIn? Are you Twitter heavy? What's going on if people want to connect with you?
TikTok? No, LinkedIn's good.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great from
LinkedIn.
you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank all three of you. You guys provided a ton of insight. That was a really valuable conversation. I learned a ton. Thank you, everyone, for the great engagement, tons of questions, and really thoughtful questions at all. So thank you, as always. You guys rock, and have a great rest of your week.